Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast in association with eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 28th of November and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 393 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Now, we've just had a little chat, haven't we?
I tell you what, I do feel sorry for retailers and car dealers at the minute with everything going on with these tier structures. I mean, it's just trying to understand whether you can or can't open and who can open, who you can operate, how you can operate, and trying to navigate through some of the government website is fairly challenging, isn't it, Curtis?
Yeah. Now, dear listener, we've just spent the last half an hour or so trawling the internet, looking at the government website to find out what you can and can't do in tiers 1, 2, and 3, and it's far from clear. It's far from obvious, but we think we've got our heads around it, don't we?
I believe so. Yeah. As far as we can understand the guidance and from messages that we have received, and as far as we can tell, car dealers can open as a non-essential retailing under the guidance on a 1, 2, or 3 tier.
Yeah. So the lockdown ends on Wednesday and the new tiers come into force across England. And of course, we've got Northern Ireland now in a 2-week circuit break. So I'm assuming that dealers must be closed there at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's a lot of conversations taking place, and a lot of whether it's the right or wrong thing to have the break over Christmas, and many probably say it's the right thing to do to have that 5-day break over the Christmas period. Many are saying that the virus doesn't have a holiday and won't have time off over Christmas, and obviously I think we were talking, weren't we, that there's the threat of a lockdown 3 as a major concern following that Christmas break.
Yeah, Mark Lavery from Cambria, he was interviewed this week, and he was suggesting that there could be a lockdown 3 in the new year as a result of the relaxation that you were talking about over the Christmas break. So we're far from out of the woods.
Great interview there as well with Matt Lavery. I mean, Matt Lavery has been a guest on the show a couple of times now, and the results, the business financials came out this week, which we'll talk about in the headlines this morning. But great interview, and if anybody does know Mark, he's fairly open, fairly transparent in his views and opinions on things, and they have been fairly heavy lobbying around the 2030 deadline of petrol and diesel vehicles and the inclusion of hybrids and the impact on the sector in the UK, and particularly his sector that he operates in from mainstream volume franchises all the way through to the premium sector as well. So it's a very fascinating interview with Matt Lavery, and he certainly doesn't hold back from some of the political agendas that are at play at the minute, but very, very interesting.
Yeah, no, Mark is always good value. We had him on the show, a few months ago now, and it's definitely worth finding that video. So headlines this week include, there's a lot of financials, so we're going to scoop up all the financials in the first half, beginning with Lookers, much delayed year ends for 2019. They're finally in. Cambria, as you mentioned, their earnings were hit by the lockdowns, but profitability improves with performance boosted by its growing luxury marque portfolio. Eastern Western Motor Group sees pre-tax profit rise to £8.5 million, and Motorpoint first half profits increased 3% to £9.7 million. And that's an interesting one because their figures are boosted by its success in online sales. And in other news, we've got electric vehicles. being seen as too expensive for the majority of buyers, according to some eBay Motors Group research. That's an interesting one because it's no longer range anxiety, it's price. We've also, returning to buying online, we've got some research on how it has increased over the last 8 months. And we'll end with all the details you'll need to enter or nominate someone for the 2021 Barbara Cox Woman of the Year Award.
Yep. So, like I say, we've got a lot of headlines this morning, and like I say, the financials. And the first one is as you mentioned there, Curtis, the in AM, and the results are out for Lookers, and it talks about Financial Pro believes Lookers with 87 million profit swing. So, a lot been going on with that group through the lockdown period and the suspension of the shares through the delay of the results. But the results are now out, and interestingly, they have had a good trading period, haven't they, through the post-lockdown? And but obviously, this has
Yes.
hit them hard in terms of some of the issues of the financials.
Yeah, and these are the much delayed end of year accounts for last year. This is 2019, as the group has been the subject of a FCA investigation. The pre-tax loss for the year was £45.5 million. And that was against a profit in 2018 of £41.9 million, and that's where this £87 million swing comes from. So add those figures together and you get the swing. But highlights, I guess if you can call them highlights, include a £25.5 million of non-cash adjustments, and according to its stock exchange statement, this was to correct misstatements in profit before tax over a number of years, and also the provision of £10.4 million for potential liabilities arising from those FCA investigations.
And these were results until the end of December 19. So obviously, when we're talking through all these financial results, they are for different periods, obviously, and
Yeah.
you know the group, as they say, you know Phil White there, who's talking on behalf of the group, he talks about obviously, you know, they've had a challenging time, obviously with all the financials, but they have, you know, worked very heavily through the lockdown and post lockdown, and they're very positive about the outlook for now for the group in terms of the profitability that they've seen post lockdown. So again, I think it's great that we've now got these out, because there was a delay, and then they were due out and then delayed and due out, etc. As we all know. But at least it's done now. The shares will, I presume, become active again very soon, if not already, and we'll start to see probably what the group look like going forward from this.
Yeah, and you did mention about the trading and outlook for 2020. So just to round that up really quickly, Q3 was ahead of 2019, and the group is saying that Q4 will benefit from the restructuring, but of course, they will be hit by lockdown too. And also, interim results for 2020 will be published in December, so we will be revisiting Lookers probably in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, we've only just talked about the 2019, but
Yeah.
we'll talk about the interims in December. But again, we know why. We won't go into that, but it's great that they are through it and looking forward to some positive trading. So as we said there, staying with AM Online and sticking with the financials, and we mentioned earlier with Cambria, earnings hit by lockdown, but profitability improved. So again, great results. So they're talking about a revenue drop of 20% in the last financial year for the group, and that's for the annual sales to August the 31st, 2020, declined to 524 million from the 677 million it achieved in the 2018 to 2019 financial period, and the underlying profit dropped 9.8% to 11.1 million. But Mark's been fairly vocal, hasn't he, about some of the impact and what's hit him through this lockdown.
Yeah, and just to dig into some of the detail here, new vehicle sales fell from 7,500 to 5,500 year on year. Although, and this is an interesting theme here, average profit per unit rose by 4% to £2,827. On the used car front, volumes dropped 21% to 10,300, although again, profit per unit increased by 7.7% to £2,068. So return on sales, they actually improved year on year from 1.87% to 2.1%. So that's well above the industry average. And this all sort of ties in with what Mark was talking about when he was on the show, because the group is seeing the benefit from its expansion into that high-end luxury vehicle sector with franchises like Bentley and Lamborghini, and this is where the margins, the better profits are coming from.
And they've been busy, through that period as well. They've strengthened the high luxury, as you mentioned there, with the acquisition of Rolls-Royce Motors cars in its leasehold premises in Edinburgh. So they've taken on Rolls-Royce up there. They've been refranchising a bit with Volvo Preston into an Alfa Romeo and Jeep to create an FCA brand centre over in Preston there, and they're talking about the completion of a land purchase in Solihull for the development of an Aston Martin Birmingham site relocation as well. So again, with everything going on, they have been very busy in terms of acquisitions and restructuring and refranchising of the group for looking forward. And again, I mean, the interview with Mark is still available, and if you've got the time, I'd suggest having a listen to that, because he does talk about obviously how busy they are and how they're looking into this sort of luxury, high-end luxury brands, and what that means for the business, and how the time it takes for that luxury brand to start to show return for the business. So it's a long investment into it for these guys.
It is, yeah. And you mentioned about opening up with Rolls-Royce in Scotland. That was an interesting move, because that's their first site in Scotland, and it's not going to be their last. I mean, they must be looking to expand in Scotland. So that is an interesting strategic move for the group.
And staying in Scotland, actually. So with results from East and Western Motor Group, who my friend up there, Keith Duncan, and fascinating group, great group up in Scotland there, with some fantastic coverage of brands. You don't hear enough about them, really. They're very heavy in terms of Mercedes, BMW, Mini, Lexus, Toyota, VAG, to name a few, including Harley Davidson as well up there. So a very prominent group up in Scotland there, and they've got their results out for the 2019, and their turnover increased to 770 million from its 2018 figures of 699 million. So these are obviously pre-lockdown figures, but talking about a GP rise up to 80 million from its previous year of 71 million. So some fascinating figures there from the East and Western Motor Group up in Scotland.
Yeah, you're right. Multi-franchise group that operating 33 sites across Scotland. And what caught my eye was like-for-like new car sales were actually up 11%, and that's against a national average in Scotland of 5.4%, so outperforming the market there. Used sales, they were up 6%, and after sales up 10%. And it's worth just repeating that this is for year ending December 2019.
Exactly. So again, great result, and it'll be interesting to see that they do talk about that the activity through the post lockdown is very positive for 2020. So again, I think we'll see a lot more from these guys as we come sort of see the next level of results coming out post the lockdown period. So well done to those guys up there. Now going over to Motor Trader now, and sticking with some more financials, but we were talking about this, weren't we, pre the show, but Motorpoint first half profits increased 3% to 9.7 million, and this is their performance for up to the end of September of this year, so
Yeah.
a little bit more current than some of those previous
Yes.
results we've just been talking about there. But again, demonstrating the great performance and activity that they've had since the first lockdown.
Yeah, and I alluded to this earlier. They do talk about online sales, and yeah, they do have this free nationwide delivery service. So online sales during this period, they say actually outpaced sales within its branches, and that growth was towards the back half of H1, and it grew to 43% of sales in 3 months to the end of September, and a volume increase of 39%.
Yeah, and they do talk about home deliveries represented 20% of online sales in September. So, again, showing that acceleration and what they've been doing in that online home delivery click and collect environment, and continuing through into September. So, there's some big results there. They've been talking about the support that they've done with the NHS workers. They've seen some great sort of full reopening of all their branches as well through that period. So they do say that they continue to improve their vehicle preparation speed and the costs. So for the full year 20 H2 improvements are now embedded. So again, they've sort of used this period of time to relook at their strategies and their efficiencies within the business, because that's that, again, it's profitability, it's that throughput and the efficiencies of that throughput for such a big group, and the activity and the volume that these guys do put through. So again, great results for those guys.
So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group, the only weekly podcast serving the car retailing sector, and available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And we know how busy you are, so this is your listen any place, anytime, anywhere, fully mobile podcast service.
So heading over to Motor Trader, and this is a report from eBay Motors, our sponsor actually, and they talk about limited supply of EVs in the used vehicle market make them too expensive. And there's a lot of conversations at the minute, isn't there, Curtis, around EV, not only in the new car market, but obviously that used car market. One about the pricing and supply and things like this, and it's certainly going to start to increase. But they've done some investigation into it.
Yeah, and it is interesting because the barriers appear to be the high purchase costs, concerns over battery life, which is an interesting one. Not something you hear an awful lot of, but particularly relevant in the used car market when the battery has been used for 3 or 4 years or whatever. So there is concern amongst buyers, and also concern regarding recharging times. So less on the sort of anxiety issues that range anxiety issues that were commonly discussed, certainly in recent years. So as you say, that this is based on research from eBay that is on the consumer insight panel research they did, and they polled the views of in-market buyers. So 49% of consumers said that they're open to the idea of switching to EVs, but only if they become cheaper. And also nearly 2/3 of respondents said EVs are too expensive compared to traditional fuel types, with 49% saying they would switch to EVs if they became cheaper. And curiously, only 16% of buyers expect to buy an electric car in the next 3 years.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting because this stuff, we'll have to try and get Tom Callow on the show one week, and so Tom Callow is involved with the Charge Master business, and very vocal, very opinionated, and very supportive of the EV sector, as you can imagine. But it's quite an interesting stat that I noticed this today on the Twitter, and he talks about 2010. Mitsubishi i-MiEV pricing announced for the UK was 38,699 pre-grant, with a circa 80-mile range. And the 2020, the new Skoda Enyaq IV Apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Pricing for the UK 38,950. So very little change in terms of the online pricing of some of these vehicles, but with a range of now 300 miles. So again, you can sort of doing these comparison over that 10-year period now. So pricing wise, still in that sort of high end, but actually the range, as you say there, that range anxiety has disappeared now because that new Skoda will do 300 miles on a charge, but the pricing is still at that just below sub 40k price point, and I think that's the bit now that is starting to wash through into the used car market as well as the new.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right there. The message is getting across to buyers that the range is a lot better than it was. You are getting decent ranges. 300 miles isn't unusual now.
It's just getting that price point right in the new and the used market space now that makes them an alternative proposition to that petrol or diesel vehicle that the consumers have been used to. So again, if you are listening, Tom, you know, let's try and catch up, and you're welcome to come on the show in the new year and talk about EV, and I know your passion for it, so let's do that.
And one last point on that particular question, eBay have actually identified 3 different types of buyers. So consumers who are committed to making an environmental difference, that according to their research, that's about 24%. Those without strong views either way, which they're calling sort of the fence sitters, which was 43%, and a dismissive group of 33% who believe climate change is exaggerated and think their actions are pointless. So it's quite an interesting observation, this, because these are typically the sort of customers that buyers are going to see over the coming months as showrooms start to reopen, consumers start coming in. So there are 3 distinct groups in terms of their views on the environment and how that will drive their next car purchase.
Yeah, let's say if you mentioned it before, but if you do get a chance, just put 20 minutes aside and watch the interview there with Mark Lavery and his views on lithium and cobalt and how you get it to build these vehicles and batteries for the EV political agenda and the impact on the environment. But very, very interesting. So moving on to back to Car Dealer, and this is they're talking about a story. Lockdown restrictions have driven up digital used car purchase 16 times in this is a survey that's been carried out, and this is by Temp Cover, who are a temporary car insurance specialist. Found that repeated changes to lockdown restrictions had fueled a surge in fully digital or digitally assisted purchases. So what's your thoughts on this one? Because they've surveyed 2016 UK drivers to come up with this result, and this was in October.
Yeah, it's in terms of topicality, it is very, very timely. So they found that 45% had combined online tools with viewing cars in person, and just 4% had fully digital purchases. This is in previous months, but since the start of the pandemic, these figures had really turned around. So 17% had bought a used car, with almost 2/3 of them, so 64%, going for the full digital experience, which is something we've been talking about for a long time. But you've got to consider that during a lot of this period, that was the only way to buy a car from beginning to end, online, because showrooms were closed to the public. But some interesting developments here, and we're starting to see more and more of this, and obviously we're hearing about it from the likes of Motorpoint, and East and Western also mentioned in their results how digital sales had grown over this period.
Yeah, again, it kind of adds with everything else, doesn't it, around that digital proposition, that activity online and what consumers are wanting to do. So again, some interesting findings there. And I suppose the key with some of this will be what happens when we do return to some kind of normality, of what these stats look like, and do a comparison of what we're seeing at the minute in terms of these percentages compared to what would happen in a post-COVID world to a certain extent as to what's remained. But very interesting. And the final story, it's not quite a story really, but this is a bit of a shout out, isn't it? So the Barbara Cox Woman of the Women of the Year award are now live, so the window is now open for the Barbara Cox Awards for 2021, and this is a very big event for the year, and it is presented by Cox Automotive, but it is in partnership with AM as well, with Stephen Byers there supporting from AM. But fantastic names with this one, isn't there, Curtis?
Yeah, so this is the third year of the awards, and so the most recent winner was Alison Jones, Group Managing Director of PSA, and she won last year, and the first year it was won by JCT 600's Beryl Carney, and as you say, it's the nomination window is now open, and so you can basically nominate anyone until the 22nd of January. So how are those nominations working? Where do you need to go to get involved in this?
Yeah, well, there is a website. So there is a womenwithdrive.co.uk/Barbara Cox Awards website, and he's actually there on the AM press release there that you can click through and nominate. So the winners are due to be announced on the 8th of March next year. And the nomination window is open until the 22nd of January 2021. So, the nominations will be reviewed by a panel of judges, and that's including Sarah Toes from Fleet News, and then we've got Liam from Cox Automotive, and Alison Fisher, who really very much leads this award, and then obviously Alison Jones, who was the 2019 winner, and Beryl is also on there, who was the earlier winner as well. So very much worth heading over there and getting your nominations in, if I'm honest with you. So great event and great award.
Yeah, and it's open to women across the automotive industry, and it is such a good initiative, and it has grown year on year. So if you can think of anyone you'd like to nominate, then do head over there and fill in the forms.
I think that's it for this week, isn't it? I think. Was other. There is other financials out there. We didn't get to them all. I think Caffeins have produced their financials this week as well. So very much now, the postponement from financials due to obvious reasons with the first lockdown and now obviously the second lockdown, but financials are now coming out, and both for the 2019 year and others. So head over to all the trade magazines that we've mentioned there, whether that's AM Online, Car Dealer, Motor Trader, etc., and check out those, because there is some fantastic results, and there is a message between them all, isn't there? Really, it's about that profit per unit. I think you picked it up on each one of them, Curtis, that there is, albeit some challenges around volumes and things like that. I think what has been demonstrated through this period post-lockdown and others is the dealers are really focusing on that PPU marketplace.
Yeah, so that's all for this week's Headlines Roundup show. You've been listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, brought to you in association with eBay Motors Group. Do join Philip and I again next weekend for all the chatter that matters. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.